Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Sri Lanka felicitates His Excellency Philomen Young of Cameroon on his election as the President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Mr. President, against the background of global turmoil, setbacks and transformations, the aspirations of this year's Assembly for a better global future resonate with those of the people of Sri Lanka. On the 23rd of September, following a transparent and peaceful electoral process and a dignified transition in keeping with our decades of democratic practice, His Excellency President Anura Kumara Dissanayake was sworn in as the 9th Executive President of Sri Lanka. The people of Sri Lanka have vested in him the mandate to realize the people's aspirations for the future and to build a sustainable foundation for future generations. His Excellency President Dissanayake has outlined to the nation his determination to put in place a united Sri Lanka and a transformed ethical political culture. A political culture echoing the wishes of the people. His future trajectory combines nation building based on public trust in governance and in the political system through accountability, integrity, and the elimination of waste and corruption. In the words of His Excellency President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, quote, "We are launching a unified Sri Lankan nation that respects diversity, fully ending an era of division based on race, religion, caste, and class." Close quotes. In order to achieve these objectives, the government has recognized that it is crucial to reinforce stability and confidence in the economy and stimulate growth. The government will work within commitments to reach macroeconomic stability through the framework of international financial institutions and in negotiations with sovereign and private external stakeholders. The government is acutely aware of the hardships that have been faced by the people in the process of economic transition. Measures will therefore be put in place to generate greater resources for enhanced public expenditure and welfare to raise the living standards of our people with equity and justice. Mr. President, the recent vote for change by the people of Sri Lanka presents us with a renewed opportunity, and we are determined to succeed, including with the support of our friends in the international community. Mr. President, despite our consensus on the Pact of the Future, this year's UNGA takes place at a moment of profound global crisis on multiple fronts. In the Middle East, we are closer to wider regional conflagration than when we convened last week, and the humanitarian suffering in Gaza gets worse by the day. The achievements of the SDGs now appears beyond our reach, and we are off target on the Paris climate goal to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. Big power rivalries and geopolitical tensions have reignited and widened, and new rifts are reappearing on north-south lines. Racism, intolerance, discrimination, and xenophobia against migrants are on the rise. Theaters of conflict and tension have opened up on land and in oceans. The developments in the digital realm provides a fertile ground for proliferation of disinformation and hate speech, with the potential of violence. Mr. President, the lingering impact of the pandemic have reverberated throughout the global economy, creating profound economic insecurities, threatening free trade and leading to protectionist barriers. We are spending more on weapons than ever before in the past, and regrettably, the use of nuclear weapons is in mainstream discourse. New domains are being weaponized, including outer space and cyberspace, while the use of AI is challenging international humanitarian law in the battlefield. Excellencies, today a large number of developing countries, including my own, face a debt crisis of unprecedented proportions. This debt distress severely impedes our ability to invest in sustainable development, as we are unable to meet these financial obligations while simultaneously investing in the future and the well-being of our people. It is a fact that financing challenges remain at the heart of the sustainable development crisis. As per the Financing for Sustainable Development Report of 2024, the SDG financing gap is between US dollars 2.5 to 4 trillion. Staggering, isn't it? Mr. President, given these immense challenges, the need for comprehensive reform of the global financial architecture has never been more pressing. The current international debt resolution framework has failed to respond adequately and efficiently to contemporary challenges. The global landscape has changed dramatically, with global debt, particularly in the developing world, increasingly controlled by international bond markets and non-Paris Club lenders. Think about it. It is therefore time that we review the architecture's traditional moorings. We must urgently reform this system to reflect the new economic landscape. It is therefore necessary, we say, to find a more efficient, comprehensive, and equitable way to address the debt crisis. Mr. President, other institutions of global governance that reflect the world of the past century need to be reformed to meet the challenges of the present and the future. The composition of the Security Council must be expanded to be representative of current global diversity and decision-making. In parallel, the role of the United Nations General Assembly, the most representative primary organ of the United Nations, where all countries have an equal voice, must be strengthened and revitalized. Mr. President, Sri Lanka's commitment to maintaining global peace and security has been unwavering. We recognize that peacekeeping is one of the most effective tools to the United Nations to help member states to manage the difficult phase of transitioning from conflict to peace. Sri Lanka has been contributing to United Nations peacekeeping operations in some of the most hostile and demanding deployments. Over 23,000 men and women from Sri Lanka, armed forces and police have contributed to ensuring international peace and security under the UN banner over the past 6 decades and has been commended for high-caliber service. Mr. President, beyond economic recovery, we face an even greater existential threat, the ongoing climate crisis, and the accompanying need for a just energy transition. Although our development strategy has not contributed to climate degradation, Sri Lanka has taken concrete steps to address these challenges. We will increase our nation's forest coverage and increase renewable energy in our energy mix. It is time for developed countries, Mr. President, to fulfill their obligations and assume their fair share of responsibilities under the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. We need their support in mitigation and adaptation efforts, as well as compensation for loss and damage. Without a concerted international effort, Mr. President, to bridge the climate financing gap, the burden of climate impacts will continue to fall most heavily on those least responsible for the crisis. Sri Lanka is committed to phase out coal by 2040 and reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. As a climate vulnerable country, Sri Lanka has been advocating for operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund and called for climate justice. There is therefore an urgent need, we say, for increased climate financing, especially for vulnerable developing nations like Sri Lanka. Mr. President, two other critical issues which are also relevant to Sri Lanka as an island nation were part of the discourse during this year's high-level week. Sea level rise is an imminent reality affecting millions. While Sri Lanka has taken mitigatory measures nationally, as included in the National Adaptation Plan for Climate Change, it is through concerted international action that solutions can be implemented to halt the global warming that is the cause of sea level rise. Sri Lanka initiated the UNGA resolution on declaring 1st of March as the World Seagrass Day to bring international attention and awareness on a small but significant aspect of universal importance of combating climate change. Sri Lanka has further been recognized for its contribution to mangrove regeneration programs as a 2024 World Restoration Flagship by the United Nations under the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Mr. President, antimicrobial resistance has become a critical public health issue the world over, with bacterial resistance linked to around 5 million deaths worldwide annually. Alarming. AMR, if not contained, has the potential to spiral into a development issue, as well with life expectancies declining worldwide. We welcome the target of mobilizing US $100 million through the Antimicrobial Resistance Multi-Partner Trust Fund to ensure that 60% of countries have funded action plans by 2030. However, international cooperation, Mr. President, and sustainable financing must increase to meet this goal. Mr. President, as we seek solutions to global challenges, we must harness the power of technology and innovation. Digital technologies and artificial intelligence offer unprecedented opportunities to accelerate sustainable development. Sri Lanka aims for sustained growth by innovation and envisages an equitable digital transformation through the establishment of accessible digital public infrastructure. At the same time, we call for increased capacity building and technical assistance to bridge the global digital divide and empower all countries to leverage these tools for the betterment of their people. Mr. President, the General Assembly's theme calls on us to leave no one behind and to act together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. In Sri Lanka, 38% of our total population is youth, which is the most capable and dynamic resource that can contribute to our future development. Sri Lanka advocates for increased youth participation in decision-making processes. After all, the Declaration on Future Generation is theirs. Simultaneously, the new Sri Lanka will realize the aspirations of a just society with greater empowerment for women who make up to 52% of our population. Mr. President, as we look towards the future, we must also address one of the gravest injustices that this Assembly has inherited from the past. Sri Lanka has repeatedly voiced its concern over the dire humanitarian situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. We reiterate our support for the recognition of the legitimate and inalienable right of the Palestinian people to statehood and join the call for a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders in line with all UN resolutions. As a country, Mr. President, that has suffered separatist terrorism for decades, we condemn the terrorist attacks in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. Sri Lanka calls for complete and unconditional lifting of all unilateral coercive measures imposed against any country, as they hinder free trade, right to development, and have unintended humanitarian consequences. Mr. President, as an island country, we are concerned about the present environmental and geopolitical aspects relating to the oceans. We want our oceans to be free of rivalry, free of conflicts, free of pollution, and to be able to sustainably manage our marine resources. The UNCLOS, with its cohesive and universal nature, provide us with a say in shaping the global maritime system. Sri Lanka remains committed to the balance and collaboration embedded within the treaty, enabling freedom of navigation and sustainable use of the oceans, respecting the sovereignty of the coastal states.